do something completely different and tell you about 10 myths of methodology. I'm going to do this very quickly, and then my colleague Elizabeth Dowling is going to say, even though I went too quickly, she has a solution for how you can access our stuff. This is also being recorded, and if anybody wants a copy of our slides, they're for free. So we're going to talk about character development and the evaluation of character education programs. Now, putting those together may seem odd, but I hope in a moment I will tell you why they're not and then go into the myths. But first, I want to tell you some truths, not myths, about scientific methods. Arthur Bachrach wrote a book in the early 60s about psychological research, and character development, character evaluation research has a psychological component. These are the three takeaways from that book. People don't usually do research the way people who write books about research say that people do research. It's much more complicated and messy than you read in a textbook. Research is not statistics. Statistics plays a part in it, but it's not the whole story. And the most important rule, he called them laws, things take longer than they do. You might have it planned out perfectly for a 6-month study, a 1-year study, double or triple it. Okay. The most important thing you could take away from this is that theory, not data, not statistics. Theory is the foundational tool of all of science, whether you're talking about physics, astronomy, biochemistry, genetics, or character development. The specific method you use in any scientific research or evaluation must be derived from theory-based questions. Why? Theory guides the selection of what to study. What character virtues or strengths are you going to measure? It tells you the levels to study. Are you going to study the person, the context? Maybe both. As you'll see, that'll be important. What are the time frames you're going to use? You're going to study the effectiveness of an evaluation program during childhood, young adulthood, aged people. How should you study the person across time? If you are you going to take a one-shot study, cross-sectional, or are you going to look at people across time, or both? It determines the design of the study. Are you going to do an interview study or a randomized control trial, which I'm going to recommend you don't do in the conventional way? It gives you data that then you have to use the correct statistical tools to analyze those data. And critically, it influences the interpretation, the meaning you give to your data. That's all theory. That's before you do any data collection at all. The scientific domains of studying character development and evaluating education programs really have a key dimension of similarity. Both domains deal with change in a person across different time periods. Development, obviously, what a 1-year-old is doing is not what an 18-year-old is doing, is not what a 78-year-old is doing. I can attest to that. Evaluation looks at a program whether you have changed the quality or quantity of a person's character across time. So you're looking at change within a person across time. You are not looking at variables. You're interested in people and whether they have changed in character. Development pertains to change in specific periods of life, childhood, adolescence, the lifespan, and educational changes pertain to the specific time between the beginning and end of an educational program, and possibly in regard to longer impacts on character. Both domains assess both quantitative or variational change, how much a number goes up or down, and qualitative or transformational changes, the way we understand intelligence is qualitatively different in a 1-year-old. We look at sensory motor functioning, and an 18-year-old, where we look at meaning making and cognitive functioning. The methods of developmental research and a program evaluation have 3 common areas: measuring change, measurement of character; research design, picking the points in time that you're going to look at when character should be measured; and then data analysis. Many of the beliefs that you are taught in intro methodology classes about these facets of methodology, measurement, design, and analysis, are simply not correct. They're actually myths. I'm going to only talk about 10. If I had a few hours, I could do all 762, but I'll just stay with 10. First 3 myths are derived from theory. Myth 1, studying character trait development or building character traits through character education programs are useful and important endeavors. False. The concept of a trait does not align with the concepts of development or the concept of education. So let me go to somebody who knows how to define words better than me. Oxford, we were just talking about all the murders that happened in Oxford. If you watch BritBox, Morse or Lewis or Endeavor. The Oxford Reviewed Encyclopedia of Terms defines a trait as something that is part of an individual's personality and therefore a long-term characteristic of an individual that is evident through their behavior and emotions. And Merriam-Webster, trait is a distinguishing quality as of personal character and an inherited characteristic. What else is an inherited characteristic? Your eye color. The word trait applies to the people who use it in character in the same way that eye color would apply. The trait approach to understanding human personality or character is exemplified by something called 5-factor theory, a conception championed by Costin, McCrae, and their colleagues. So I'm going to give you a quote. Costin, McCrae believe that personality traits reflect nature over nurture, and that personality traits are more or less immune to environmental influence. Significant variations in life experiences have little or no effect on personality traits. They argue that barring interventions or catastrophic events, personality traits would be essentially fixed after age 30. Therefore, in both common parlance and in some areas of science, character traits are held to be fixed, stable, and biologically set facets of individual functioning that, just as for eye color, do not change across time, no matter how much development occurs or how many high-quality character education programs are experienced. The fact of the matter is that if you actually study this, the scores for character at one time in life, if it were a trait, would be 100% identical to the scores at another time. Let me ask you all, what was your eye color when you were born? How about age 1? How about age 3? Right? It doesn't change. That's what a trait is supposed to do. 100% agreement. The percentage of actual agreement for the same character attribute across life rarely exceeds 50% agreement, and ordinarily, it's less than 10%. You get a 0.3 correlation, you square the correlation, you get 9%. That's what it is. The reasons for the lack of agreement can't be accounted for by genes because the genes have remained the same. Therefore, please do not refer to character traits in the study of character development or in the evaluation of character education program. Call them attributes. And if it wasn't redundant, call them characteristics. Using the word trait is tantamount to shooting yourself in the foot. Myth 2. The validity of a character measure can be established by the interrelations, for example, the correlations, between the scores from the measure with scores from measures of other constructs. So validation is a complex process, and somebody in the audience was taking a class with me, and I spent 9 hours explaining what that word actually means. Validity is a theoretical concept. It is not created because scores from a measure of character and scores for other attributes covary or are correlated. The possession of a character attribute may predict other concepts, but character is not equal to those other concepts. So let's look at the character attribute of generosity. Character, this is empirical evidence that I can cite for you. If you have a high score in generosity, you will get high scores in social admiration from others. You'll gain community respect. It may be correlated with your religious beliefs or with what John Templeton called agape love. But that's not generosity. But those correlations are very high. So generosity may predict those things, but it's not those things. Let me give it another example. Intellectual humility. We've heard a lot about that today. Intellectual humility can be predicting other things, but it may not be intellectual humility. It could be you have strong social relationship skills. We heard about that in the keynote this morning. You could have generous listening that we've heard about as well. Really listen to other people. You know how to build consensus in people. Or you're a curious person. All of those things are predicted by intellectual humility, but they're not intellectual humility. Intellectual humility is something else. Myth 3. Character is what is measured by the character development items included in the character measure being used. This is the last theoretical idea. The validity of a measure of character is not created by scores from observable attributes of thinking, feeling, or behaving. Unlike reliability, there is no such thing as a validity coefficient. All those things about construct validity and convergent and discriminant validity, that's not validity. That's prediction. It's useful, it's a prediction analysis, but intellectual humility was not the things that it was correlated with. There are no numbers or correlations that can be used to establish validity, just like there are for reliability. A measure of character is valid if and only if it provides scores that would be theoretically held to exist if the attribute of character existed. To make this really plain for you, how many of you ever used a thermometer under your tongue to measure your body temperature? Anybody? Now, how did you know if you had a fever? Because mercury went up in a piece of glass? Is that what body temperature is or a fever is? Mercury going up in a glass tube? No, it's a measure that you believe is giving you an index of body temperature because your body temperature has created the warmth necessary to raise that mercury. The mercury rises because you believe it was caused by body temperature. The same thing for character. A measure of character has to be understood as being valid if and only if you believe that your idea, your theory of character causes those attributes. That's a very radical idea. It goes against much of psychometric measurement. It goes against 80 years of measurement of intelligence, or 100 years if you want to go back to the Stanford Binet, which is 1916 was the original publication of the Stanford Binet IQ test. This is a big side thing. Everything you thought you know about measuring IQ is wrong. Everything. What? Myth 11. Yeah, that'll be myth 11, but it's not character, so I didn't put it in. So here is what is caused by intellectual humility. Valuing different opinions. you won't value that if you don't have intellectual humility. Willingness to reconsider one's views. You won't have that if you don't have intellectual humility. Responding to criticism non-defensively. We heard that this morning. Tell me more. You won't have that unless you have intellectual humility. Seeking new ideas. If you don't have intellectual humility, you know everything you need to know. Realistic about one's own limitations. The great philosopher Clint Eastwood said that in Magnum Force, if you remember that movie. So these things that you are measuring are created because you have something called intellectual humility. Myth 4, We'll talk about this at the reception. Traditional randomized controlled trial design is the gold standard in character education program evaluations. My colleague Jen Urban calls this premature experimentation, which for a guy my age it means other things, but anyway. Traditionally designed RCTs are fool's gold. Jen's work shows that there is a developmental sequence to evaluation, which is invaluable, and you presented earlier today about, was it? Not on that. Okay. We have known that in the study of human development, not drug trials for COVID vaccines, but in drug trials, you don't need this design, but in human development you do, and you'll see why in a second. Richard Solomon and his colleague in 1968 published a paper in 68 saying you need 3 control groups to understand whether you have a gold standard design. Now, what does that really mean? A traditional randomized controlled trial, I'll use RCT from now on, is designed to prove that a treatment, for example, participation in a particular character education program, causes a change in behavior. Otherwise, why would you be giving them the treatment? The traditional design has 2 groups, and participants are randomly assigned to group 1 or group 2, so as to eliminate through randomization any systematic pre-existing conditions in participants that could impact the results. And this is called controlling for selection effects, or a big word, endogeneity. That there's something within you that makes you different. Everybody's different, so you randomly distribute that, and one group has the same random distribution as the other. That's the assumption. Group 1 is measured or pre-tested, treated, and then remeasured, post-tested. Group 2 is measured, pre-tested, not treated, and then measured, post-tested. Causality, that the treatment caused change, can be claimed when on remeasurement, post-testing, group 1 is significantly different than group 2, because they were randomly the same, and then you had it. When random, there's a footnote there, when random assignment, you can't assign people to be in a Boy Scouts character education program, or now it's called Scouts. West Point cadets who are trained to be leaders of character, you don't get randomly assigned to go to West Point, right? Thank goodness, because I might have ended up there and I would have been a total dud. Okay, so causality can be claimed when and only when group 1 is significantly different than group 2. But the assertion of the existence of a causal relation is considered true only because it's believed that the traditional RCT, the 2-group design, is something called internally valid. That's a big word, but it really is simple to understand. Internal validity exists when the treatment, and only the treatment, can be associated with the remeasurement differences between group 1 and group 2. But traditionally designed RCTs may or may not show internal validity, and you can't tell with only one control group. Because of the claim of internal validity for the traditional 2-group RCT, it's been considered the gold standard for proofs of causality in character development research and in evaluations of character ed programs. And many funders will only fund you if you can do an RCT. And they'll be very happy with the two-group design, and they're wasting their money. As implemented through the 20th century and across the first 3 decades of this century, the traditional design has been largely fool's gold. So let's look at it. I've explained the design. Experimental group gets pre- and post-tested, and the O stands for something, treatment. Group 1, the first control group, no treatment, but pre-test, post-test. Now, is that the only thing that could cause change between the groups, the fact of treatment? Control group 2, notice, doesn't have a pre-test, but has treatment. Why doesn't it have a pre-test? Because you're measuring something in people who are going to react to it. And you don't know what that reaction is going to be. For instance, the pre-test could make people interested in, oh, I never thought about those issues before, and now you begin thinking about them. And different people in the control group, the pre-test control group, might think differently about that. There goes your randomization. Or they might say, this was a waste of my time. These are dumb questions. I don't care about them. And then when retested, they'll show you they don't care about them, and whoops, you got a significant effect. So if you don't have group 2, you can't claim internal validity. Whoop. Group 3 has nothing but the post-test. Why? Because something can happen, depending on how long it is between pre-test and post-test, something can happen. What do we call that thing that happens to people across time? Well, one word you could use is development. Development can happen. My 1-year-old youngest granddaughter, Solea, couldn't reach the cookies when dessert time came on the shelf of our island in the middle of our kitchen. And she would cry because she wanted the same cookies her sisters were having who could reach it. Well, now she's 2.5 years, and guess what? Not only can she reach it, she pulls the cookies down and runs off with them to another room, the whole box. Was that because of treatment, or was that because she grew 6 inches? Development happened. So unless you have that third group, you're not controlling for maturation, learning, or development. Okay, myth 5. By studying average changes across time in a group of individuals involved in a character ed program, researchers or evaluators can learn about character development or about the effectiveness of a character education program. False. Character education is about changing a specific individual's character through the person's participation in the character ed program. It is about change within an individual as a consequence of a specific individual context relation. It is not about average changes between people. Average differences between people do not correspond to changes within any person who's in the group that you're averaging. I'm going to now quickly show you some slides that will first illustrate the point I've just made and then show you actual data from my lab as well as other labs. So this slide shows that if you're comparing all these people on character at one point in time, that's the top, I don't have a pointer, but the top line, the greens and as well as the pink people there, that's between person differences. That says nothing about what happens in the pink person across time. So what could happen between the difference between and within? You might have the same average, but let's take 2 young girls who are in a character education. Here are some of the Peterson and Seligman character attributes that some of you know about, values in action survey. And they're part of a group. Here's the average for the group. This is made-up data. This is just to illustrate it with 2 cute girls. What we see for these 2 young girls is that average really doesn't capture either of them. Well, you say, that's a good example, but That's just, one point in time. Let's look at real data. Jackie Lerner and I did a 10-year study studying 7,000 kids involved in either 4-H programs, I'm assuming you know 4-H is a youth-serving program, or in other programs around the country. 7,000 kids from 5th grade, time 1, to 12th grade, time 8. And we studied 7,012 kids, half of their parents. We studied dozens of things. One of the things we studied is self-regulation. And here is just one measure. I can do this for every measure we studied, but I just picked this one. 7,000 kids, and we used a Likert scale, which I'll now tell you later on you should never use. But this was in 2002 we collected these data. So what you see here is the mean at grades 1, or at times 1 through 8, which is grades 5 through 12, is about 4, a little bit above average. Now, we had something called a planned missingness design because of retesting effects. So at time 1, we studied like 1,700 5th graders. When the 5th graders got to 6th grade, we took a new group of 6th graders and studied them. When those two groups got to 7th grade, we took a new group of 7th graders. So think of a triangle. It got bigger and bigger in terms of sample size because we had planned missingness. We only had 59 kids who were present at all 8 times of testing. So let's look at those 59 kids, their average across time. Look at that. They're almost identical. I'll go back. Rich, what are you talking about? The 59 kids look just like the 7,000. With 59 kids, however, I could show you the individual trajectories across 8 times of all 59 kids. So on the next slide, you'll see a thick black line that represents this line here, and then you'll see the individual trajectory of all 59 kids. These are kids studied a year apart. Look at the variation a year apart. Okay, that's your study, and clearly you're not an unbiased observer, Rich. So let's go to Neelam Ram, Stanford, Peter Molinar from Penn State, John Nesselrode and colleagues from Penn State University. They went to University of Illinois Urbana, and they studied 180 college students across a half a semester. On each day, it was a daily diary. There were 8 positive emotions: happy, jubilant, hopeful, kind, 10 negative emotions: depressed, sad, angry, or 8. So 8 positive, 8 negative. On any day, each kid could have from 0 to 8 positive and 0 to 8 negative. And 49 consecutive days, and here's what they found. Now look at both the curve. It's a sinusoidal curve, but notice that on the, and this is across the 49 days, the 7 weeks of the half a semester, that the positive emotions go from 0 to about a half of 1 positive emotion, and for negative emotions, go from 0 to 0.25 negative emotions. Now, clearly, all of you deal with college students. You know that this represents the college students on your campus who walk around as emotional zombies. For 7 weeks of the semester, they walk around with no emotions. Yes, of course, because you see it right there in the data. That's the average of those 180 people every day in the study. Now let's look. It's not going to be as neat as the colors I showed you on mine. Look at that. That's the 180 trajectories. And notice that it goes from +4 to -4. Okay, so now I did a study. Elizabeth and I did a study with Turnaround for Children, which was a child organization in New York and American Institutes for Research. I'm going to report very quickly 2 data sets. One only had 35 kids about age 16. The other had 216. And group reports of empathy for group 1, and group 2, characteristics of curiosity, relationship skills, generosity, etc. The first group was studied during the COVID crisis. So we ended it after 30 days. So empathic concern, an important attribute of character, totally flat for the 35 kids. Here's the time series plot. This is meaningful data. We use the statistical method that allows us to see if these are meaningful variations. This is the 35 kids. Now, we go to the 216 kids. We did this in Chicago. This is a sample of, it was 98.5% African American, the rest Latino. Relationship skills. Here, the black lines in all these graphs always represent the mean. Here is the individual variation. This is across 15 weeks, a whole semester. Intellectual character, curiosity, generosity. So the average scores tell you nothing. Ms. Fix, how am I doing for time? 10 more minutes. Great. Before Elizabeth, right, great. I'll do it because I only have 5 to go. Then these go quickly. Changes in an individual's character can be assessed by comparing scores for character attributes across 2 points in time. No. At least 3 measurement occasions are needed, and even more is better, to protect against statistical artifacts, which I'll show you, something called regression to the mean, and to improve estimation of people's development. You see how many times of testing we need to look at what's going on intra-individually. So regression to the mean is a statistical artifact of repeated sampling a character attribute. It's very simple. If the true mean for a group or for an individual, it really doesn't matter, is, let's say, 5. On one day, it could be 8, on another day, it could be 3. If that is not meaningful variation, what's likely to be what's going to happen the second time? You're going to see a change closer to the actual mean. And that's called regression to the mean. It only happens grossly at 2 times of testing. If you have 3 times of testing, that is decreased. So you see the example, extreme scores on either below or above the mean go back the second time of testing. John Nesserode and colleagues found that regression to the mean, and there's the reference, is largely a phenomenon associated with 2 times of measurement. It's much less likely to occur with 3 times and becomes increasingly unlikely with even more times. If you're studying 49 times, 100 times, there's no regression there. Therefore, if you want to demonstrate development or the impact of your program, use at least 3 times of testing, and more is better. Myth 7, in studying character development or in evaluating a character ed program, measures should be used that have been shown to be reliable and valid within individuals that are similar to the ones participating in your current program. Go out and find what someone else has been using and you use them. False. Reliability and validity scores for people in past research are not necessarily applicable to the people participating in your study of your program. Best example, IQ. The Stanford Binet, the gold standard in intelligence, was standardized on white middle-class Protestants from the Midwest. Some people were not white middle-class Protestants from the Midwest, yet the norms developed for the white middle-class Protestants from the Midwest were used for decades to look at diverse people of color, people from different cultures. You can't just pick up a score and use it. Reliability does not reside in the words printed or on a page or appearing on a screen. Individuals, not the words on a page, think, feel, behave. Reliability or in a manner that reflects character. Therefore, new people require new estimates of validity and reliability. Past information could suggest what you might do, but it doesn't get you away from having to understand what is true for your particular people. So here I give examples. I'm going to not read all this. If you do a study in Durham, North Carolina, isn't that an area in North Carolina? Durham, North Carolina. I think there's a university there, right? It's not as good as this one, but it's okay. Boston, or Corvallis, Oregon. How useful is that for studying people in KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa, urban areas of Bogota, Colombia, or in Brisbane, Australia? Measures cannot adapt by themselves to being consistent across time and place. Researchers and evaluators need to adapt measures to the time and place and people for whom this measure is intended for use. Myth A, once a test or survey measure has been shown to be reliable and valid, it's okay to make minor wording changes to items, stems, or responses options to make the tool more appropriate. False. When reliability and validity are ascertained, the information pertains to specific people responding to specific items on a test. The relation can't be generalized to other versions of the test. Individual measure relations always vary across people, time, and place. Changing one word or one facet of the testing procedure creates a new measure. You have to reestablish everything. Myth 9, use of Likert items is an appropriate way to assess the strength or magnitude of a character attribute. Here are 2 Likert items. 2, hurts little bit. 4, hurts little more. 6, hurts even more. 8, hurts whole lot. And then there's a step in between. Example of a 5, strongly agree, disagree. If we got 10 people at random here and have them line up in size places from tallest to shortest, give the tallest one 10, the next one 9. Are the inches different, consistent from 10 to 9 as from 4 to 3 or from 2 to 1? That's what you're doing. You're taking an order and treating it as if it is a ruler. True individual measure is needed in a ruler or in body temperature. The visual analog scale. So the visual analog scale is now used, and its key limitation, you have to use it with a smartphone or a computer. And it replaces the Likert scale. The Likert scale was invented because people had to take out rulers to measure where a person's check on a score sheet was. So here is a visual scale. You're curious, intellectual character. I'm curious about science. Curiosity is a part, not necessarily of humility, but of character, intellectual character. So before the program, you give it to them, and then after the program. Or you give it to them this way. You put in the middle, and you say, how curious are you now? And you compare it to where they were before the program. And you could either have the counter, where they place it, and it should be 0 to 100, 0 to 10, but it's a true interval scale. Myth 10. Once reliability and validity are established for a specific group being studied or evaluated. Oh, you did give me water. I forgot. For a specific group being studied or evaluated, you can use scores from the measures to assess differences within the group. For example, you have a group of people, you have scores for them, and now you want to say, okay, I'm going to divide the group by gender, by age, by race, religion. And I'm just going to use the same scores. Same boys and girls, I'll compare. An average score for a specific group cannot be assumed to represent all subgroups in the study, or it should say, or evaluation. Such equivalence, also termed invariance, must be assessed. Today, there are easily, and I'm not going to go into these details, thank goodness, I know you're happy to hear that. Today, there are easily accessible both statistical and visualization procedures to determine if there is invariance. So here I took, this actually comes from agriculture, kernel densities of corn. So here's the average, but Group A, Group B, and Group C, it could be Iowa corn, Nebraska corn, and Florida corn. They grow corn in Florida? Okay. And you see it's different. So Don't go to subgroups unless you see that there's invariance. Whew. Elizabeth will now fix everything for you.
Fix everything. I'm not sure about that. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Dowling, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Institute for Applied Research and Youth Development, Tufts University. I actually got my PhD under Rich 20 years ago, and then left and did international development work. And when you see like what a passionate speaker he is about this, you'll understand why I came back 8 years ago to help work in the lab with him. So implications and next steps, when we think about implications of what he just said, is going to be different for every single person in here. So for some of you, that been a ton of new stuff and maybe gone over your head a little bit. For some of you, you've known all of this for years and years and years. For some of you, you might want like 4 more classes or 5 more hours with him to go deeply into each of those myths and the solutions. And for some of you, again, it's like I teach this to my kids. So we understand that there's going to be different implications from what he said for everybody. So what we decided to do the talk this way because of that, but also to understand, like, understanding those 10 myths, right, is super important if you're going to enter into this world of assessment and evaluation. Because you could go down a path a path that's funded and a path that has a team, and all of a sudden you end up with science that's not good, and that is not good for anybody. So to know that these myths and the steps you can take to avoid them is a good starting point. And going beyond that is something we are going to share with you about an initiative that we've been involved with. The other piece I should say is that knowing that everybody is coming here with different levels of expertise, right? We know that as a team and as our team, that we're always wanting to interact with different players out there in the world that are doing assessment, and the way we interact with those different partners and players is different. So needless to say, we've given you a little intro, but to become an expert at this, does take maybe 10,000 hours of work. Maybe it takes being in a doctoral program or a graduate program. To be good at evaluation and assessment requires deep training. But we wanted to share an initiative that we've been involved with that we think has the potential to have a big impact kind of on the world of character education. So the Templeton Charity Foundation has an initiative called the Global Innovations in Character Development. And when they were creating this, they got proposals in from organizations from around the world, mostly from the global south. And what they were realizing and assuming was that a lot of these applications and proposals were coming from organizations that were doing incredible work on the ground. But they didn't really have a proposal, this is a research study they submitted, where the research was good. So rather than saying, you know what, this isn't good, the reviewers don't like this one, you have to change all these things, they said, why don't we create a team of advisors who are experts in research and not turn away these proposals, but focus on capacity building. So that has been something that we are part of with the Jubilee Center from the University of Birmingham in the UK, with Jen Urban's Wright Institute at Montclair State University, and with our lab. So we've been doing it for 3-ish years. We have another year or so where we're working with these global South organizations. It's really kind of the first of its kind character building platform. Jen and I were just talking at lunch about how we like the idea of it being more of a community of practice, because platform, I don't know, just seems kind of cold in a way. We have grantees from every region of the world who are involved in it, and they get capacity building support not only from us, but at this point in the initiative from each other as well. And really the secret sauce that we have found that is helping this be so effective is from the outset, we have understood that these are like full collaborations that we're entering into, full partnerships that we're entering into. Yes, we might be the experts about science and research and methodology and evaluation and path models, but the partners who we are working with are experts of their context and the kids they're serving. So it is like deeply getting to know each other and how we can serve each other. And John Templeton, his key character virtue that he likes to see in every aspect is humility. And when you're working with organizations in the Global South, I think this is one of the key
Don't use
virtues.
I heard, don't use that.
Virtues, whatever myth that was even myth one, to really work equitably in these partnerships. So the platform, we always say, kind of provides our partners with these soup to nuts support. At the beginning of the initiative, Templeton really didn't even know what kind of support that they would end up needing, but our teams right away, as we were assigned teams from KwaZulu-Natal or Africa, Asia, Latin America, was like going back to the beginning and looking at their proposals and saying, okay, what's your theory of change? So working with them to create a theory of change and almost rewrite their proposals, looking at what their expectations are for outcomes, looking at the activities they believe is leading to those outcomes. Jen just did this great session on path modeling. We did have to do that almost with every single grantee in this initiative, and they're over, I think, 60 at this point. So we work with them on everything, strengthening conceptual evaluation, the methodological skills. We've generated opportunities for peer learning, and this would be true within character ed programs within the United States as you're looking to build up your understanding and your impact. What networks can you start to create with each other? We're also working them to plan for sustainability and scale, and to do that, obviously, we have to make sure that the science and the methodology along the way has been rigorous and good and relevant to their context. And then we're also working with them to support creation of and dissemination of outputs. So we want to make sure we're elevating these people from the Global South, these scientists and practitioners, so they are getting in the top journals, so their program is getting the attention it deserves to impact the field. We've had a ton of lessons learned. Most of them are around, like if you think about developmental science as being something that describes, explains, and that ideally optimizes positive youth development, we have had a ton of lessons learned around the describing and explaining phases. When it comes to describing, this would be in the measures, right, that you use to measure change. I like to think of our lab as being a lab who understands how complicated and hard this is, and Rich wrote about it as one of the myths. It's even harder to do it well than I think we anticipated when your partners are a partner across difference, right? Where it might be a very different experience from the one you're in. So our lab tends to visit with our partners for at least a week, go back and do trainings, swap back survey question items, all that stuff to make sure we truly know our partners. But one of the things that's coming out is that when there is a difference between, almost like a perceived power difference between the practitioner team and whether it be the university team or the researcher, then there's always going to be this a little bit of distrust. So whatever you can do to build trust between you as a researcher and your practitioner partners, invest in that. The people on the platform team, we talk about we need to influence funders to understand the need to invest in trust building and relationship building at the beginning of a project. Because if you don't have that, then you don't deeply understand the context, and then you end up creating measures that aren't the right ones. Explaining is the analyses that you might do, the report writing you might do, and a lot of the work that we're doing with our partners, I think the partners really want us to do a lot more translation, right? What did you get? Why did you get it? What does this mean for our program? And so as scientists, you have to think okay, I did the data collect, I did the analysis, and here it is, and this is what's coming out as being effective or not effective. And the practitioners often want, well, what about all those 17 other constructs you studied? So there's a lot of translation support and back and forth in partnership development work in the explaining phase. What we have found from this platform model is that the return on investment is super high. So there are different people in this room who might really need and be seeking support in what we've been talking about, evaluation assessment, that maybe you don't have the capacity, maybe your school doesn't have the capacity, maybe you're a community college where, that program has been cut and you're the only one in the department and you don't have the capacity to do this. The platform is actually an incredible model where we bring together, it's not just our 3 teams. When we realized our partners, our practitioner partners, really needed help on qualitative assessment, we called the best person we know on qualitative assessment. And she came and she gave a webinar. And it wasn't just the 68 partners. It's like anybody you know in your community who wants to get on the webinar, they can attend. And then it's kind of like free training in qualitative assessment that they're getting just by attending our webinars. We also do things like, we had 6 sessions on policy, how to create a policy paper. Because there are a lot of teams who are like nationally scaled programs who want to influence policy, but have no capacity or training at all to do that. So through the platform, again, we can say, who's the best on doing policy? We had some people from the UK and from the US who both did that, and all these practitioners from around the world are getting access to the best in the world. And again, it's like a really lean, mean team, but the impact and the scale is incredible. So we just think it's an excellent model, and we kind of want to spread the news and would love for more of you to participate as we consider scaling this model in the U.S. Also, with youth programs in the U.S., there's a lot of interest there because they have, for example, the American Camp Association. They do a lot of character work. How many camps are there all around the world? When kids go to summer camps, the focus is to be a good kid, to be all these things. So they're seeking character, but they don't have the capacity to do research. So anyway, so these are things that we're talking about. If you are interested in learning more about the model, please, we did not put our emails on here, but.
They can find it.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's it. I'm sure many of you have many questions for Rich, so we have about 10 minutes for Q&A.
Well, for you too. We should both stay up here.
Any questions?
We've intimidated everybody or bored them to death. So, yes. That's a really good question. Yes, I've just invented one in my head, but I don't know how to build it. So you can, have you ever had a hearing test where they have, right, those are vibrating at different frequencies, right? So imagine you had a machine and you had it from the lowest vibration to the highest vibration. Now, I don't know how to build this, but there's a dial. And so you train them, you say, because you have to do that with a visual analog, especially if you're doing it in Africa where you're using a ThinkPad and they've never seen one before. So you would create a device. We should patent this, Elizabeth. And you say, okay, if you really agree with this, you would tune it, you want to make sure you're not hurting their ears and you're not using something that only a dog can hear, not a person. So you have an acceptable range, but it's gradated. Every click of the dial moves it to a different vibration frequency. So find the vibration frequency that you think is what you agree with the most, and turn down the noise or the sound until if you think it's not good, and you would go back and forth that way. And now that machine doesn't exist as far as I know, but someone who has some technological ability, just so you know, in studies of the technologically gifted, I'm always in the comparison group. What? Yeah, it's volume, but you have to have something that records the metric for how loud it is, the decibels, or with a tuning fork, it's frequency. So the tuning fork is frequency, because the way your ear works, your inner ear works, there are cells in your cochlea that vibrate to different frequencies. That's how you hear differences. So loudness translates into frequency, and that's how you hear. That excites the cilia cells in your cochlea, in your inner ear. So I'm sure audiologists, I'm sure the machine exists, because they want to, for people who, like me, may be getting a little bit hard of hearing, you go in to an audiologist. I don't need a hearing. That may be the only thing I don't need right now is a hearing aid. Everything else I need, canes and walkers. But anyway, but I'm sure the machine exists, so that's what you can do. And that's a great idea. We can put that in our next thank you. Great question. Sir?
Thank you. We are coming from Spain, and maybe you can add another myth, or it's a question, it's a myth about translating instruments, the translation of instruments. Would you recommend that? And second, is there a way to use the platform in a different language?
We are using it. How many languages in Uganda? Are we? 5 languages in Uganda. As you know, the Spanish that you speak in Spain is not the same Spanish in Guatemala, for example. So we have to do that as well. Yes, but translation and even translation and back translation is only the beginning, because what's important, language is an expression of your culture. And we need to know if the word, even though it translates, really has the same meaning. So you have to you need an expert in the culture. That's not me. So that's why you need that humble, non-colonialist collaboration. But we've been doing that. Spanish, I would say, is our most frequently translated. Because we've been working in El Salvador a lot.
In Rwanda, we thought it would take like a day and a half to train the data collectors in the survey. And they had it in both, all of them could speak English, but they had it in Kinyarwanda and English. And we had already done all this back and forth work with actual Compassion International was our partner, their team. But when we had these 14 independent data collectors, part of the process was to look at each word and make sure it meant what we thought it meant. It took us 2.5 days, because they went back and forth with each other about different words that, the Compassion team, who are all high-level employed people, had decided on. But when it got to data collectors who weren't as highly educated, it took 2.5 days and a ton of changes. But as for the platform, right now, I don't think we've done any sessions in a different language, have we? Yeah.
And we were also working in Colombia, the University of the Andes, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah, but I mean, we do want it to be a global model, because there's such great need and such great potential impact for it.
I think it is the last thing we're holding. Oh, yeah, one more question, because I'm holding you back from drinks. So that's, no, that's okay.
So I'm speaking to Don from the Association of Children's Museums, and I'm so glad you mentioned your work with the Museum Association, because we have a very similar grant and we're working with children's museums, but I think this is relevant to more cases. In settings like a camp or a classroom, you have at least a group of folks that you're likely to see again for some period of time. In children's museums, that's a lot harder.
Yes.
Is there any value to the data you can collect over, just in those one sessions that could still hold some kind of value and still have some kind of takeaway?
Yes. So you can do a one-time survey, but there's something that many of you know about. It's called Fitbits, right? And those are wearable monitors. So let's say you had 30 kids in, what kind of museums are we talking about? Okay, children, like in Boston. Okay, so they're in the Children's Museum of Boston, and they're going for a tour. And your grant covers wearables. You can get heart rate, galvanic skin responses, and it's going to be done anonymously because you don't need their names, you just need the code number on their Fitbit, the version of their Fitbit. And you could look at how interest through physiological responses varies across that session. And now you have their questionnaire, also with the code number on it, and you don't need to identify, so that's how you protect privacy. But you then have their responses on a visual or an auditory analog scale, right? And you can have second-by-second measurements of all of those things that go along with interest. And that's how you would do it. Mike, I mentioned Neelam Ram. Neelam Ram has a study with hundreds of people. He knows who they are, they've consented, where he has their smartphones connected to a huge computer at Stanford. Every 5 seconds of every hour of every day for weeks and weeks and weeks, he takes a picture of what's on their smartphone, day and night. And he's analyzing those data. Now, the reason that he's doing it that way, one reason, there's a lot of reasons, is he's a great methodologist. So he's doing that because you need a lot of data for something called non-mean reverting systems. I talked about regression to the mean. We got to get away from that regression to the mean. So you need a lot of individual data for that. But how he analyzes what's on your smartphone into meaningful data, it's beyond my expertise. But the innovations in methodology could be, I would love to have, because we send my grandkids go to the Children's Museum all the time. And they tell me what they ate. So yeah, no, that's relevant. The ability to adapt these methods to make things relevant to the practitioner or to the researcher in different areas is just, I'm a very old guy, but I'm really excited, pumped up by that. I'm leaving the field at a time when things are really burgeoning and could really make a difference for the positive development of kids and adults around the world. Because we have the methods. We just have to have the ability to collaborate in a humble way to get them used. Because if we keep on doing all these myths, we won't make any progress. Anyway, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Julie.
Please go enjoy.